Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Well, welcome back, everybody. Good to have you along with us. We got lots to talk about here, and we're going to start with a gentleman who has dedicated his life and career to making life better for many in terms of where we live, how we get to where we go, and just the overall infrastructure of a municipality. Specifically, I'm talking about the Pittsburgh area. He was an urban and regional planner at the University of Pittsburgh and still has his finger on the pulse of all of this, getting lots of calls and lots of feedback from students, younger people, even their parents, looking to get into the field of urban planning. Richard Golden Bickel Jr., our man of the year, is back with us. How are you doing today?
Very good, thanks.
Oh, it's good to have you back here. And I'd like to start with an email that we got, if we could.
Sure.
And by the way, you can reach out, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com, or you can reach us 631-438-1576. This one from Kelly in Searsport, Maine. She emailed after we spoke last, and she says, can you tell me if taking political science is useful in an urban planning career?
I would say definitely, because you're going to end up working with local elected officials and also those at the county and state levels, and they have different agendas in many cases, but you need to learn how to work with them, and especially as a planner, you're an advisor, and you are generally not making decisions. They're the ones who will make the decisions.
Would you say, Richard, in your career, dealing with the political side was one of the more challenging things that you had to go through?
Yes, it was challenging because as I moved through my career, I ended up working at the Regional Planning Commission, and there you saw a different level. You had people who were from the counties and regional agencies making decisions on transportation funding and regional plans, whereas at the local level you have citizen planners and local politicians making decisions on local issues, different scale. But the important thing is that if you're a planner, you've got to work with both, because you need to coordinate where the funding is going to go through the Regional Planning Commission and how development occurs at the local level.
So I'm curious, how much in your role, how much interaction did you have with the general public?
At the local level, you generally have more because people show up at local township and borough meetings to voice their opinions. And sometimes they are representatives of Not in My Backyard groups, NIMBY groups, who come because they're threatened by a development proposal. And so the planner doesn't make the decision, but the planner can help to be the go-between between the proponents of a project and the opponents of a project.
In your career, is there something that stands out for you, a project that you had more personal stake in, or it just resonated with you? That could be big, it could be small, doesn't matter. Any particular one stand out for you?
Well, we had a project when I worked at SEPTA, the public transit agency, that was called the Cross County Metro. It was along a rail line called the Trenton Cutoff from Bucks County to Delaware County, passing through Montgomery County. And it looked great on paper, and we thought it was going to be a winner, and hired a consulting firm to come up with population and employment projections. And it just didn't pencil out. The numbers were low, the cost was high, and so the project died before it went too far. And that's an experience that often happens for any project, particularly a big project like the project recently approved in New York to add another tunnel between New Jersey and Manhattan. And that's a critical link on the Northeast Corridor. And there, the numbers are very high, I think over $90 billion. And the federal funds are there because of the Transportation Investment Act that was passed a couple of years ago in the Biden administration. And I think there it can be a winner, even though it's a mundane project to the average person. If you have trains from New Jersey Transit, Amtrak, and others trying to squeeze into Manhattan with one tunnel, all it takes is a bad storm or some other problem to block the tunnel, and that causes chaos on the Northeast Corridor, the heaviest public transit corridor in the country.
And we're going to go to a call in a second. I'm just curious, did a lot of projects die on the vine, so to speak?
Yes. Well, the Cross County Metro was an example of a project that died on the vine, and then there was a very interesting project that would have connected a rail line into the King of Prussia business district area, where the King of Prussia Mall is one of the largest malls in the East Coast. And it looked great on paper, and the numbers were pretty good. But the Federal Transit Administration looked at it as too much money for not enough people being attracted, and they killed the project.
Gotcha. I'd like to circle back on malls and shopping centers. There's many vacant in just a moment. Let's go to a call. Hi, who's this?
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Hannah. How you doing?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for checking in. We have Richard Golden, Jr. Bickel here, if you have a question for him.
I do. Mr. Bickel, I did want to know, when did you decide that you wanted to pursue being a planner? Because I find it extremely interesting.
Well, it's kind of a convoluted story. I started as an undergraduate at the University of Pittsburgh as a biology major, thinking I was going to be a doctor. And then I took chemistry and organic chemistry, and all of a sudden I realized I wasn't going to be a doctor because I didn't do well in chemistry. And so in junior year, I took an urban geography course, and it was taught by a professor in the planning school, and I got turned on to planning. It was terrific. And then by the time I was a senior, I applied to get into the graduate program and was accepted. So I went right from undergraduate at Pitt to graduate program at Pitt.
Well, Hannah, are you thinking about a career in urban planning?
I am. I did want to know what part interests him the most, because this is very, wow, I can't, this is amazing. You are an amazing person, so.
Is there something, Richard, that did it for you? The one aspect of urban planning that, when you got to that point, like, yes, this is my purpose. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think the thing I was most interested in is interacting with people and with development projects in the Pittsburgh area at the time as a student. And when I moved to southeastern Pennsylvania to start my planning career in the counties adjacent to Philadelphia, I took those lessons, and it became very helpful when I was working on projects within the local governments in those counties around Philadelphia.
Wow. I want to say, Hannah, best of luck to you. Thanks for calling in today, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I want to move on to another email that we got. And this is from Justin in San Diego, who says, in an urban planning career, who is most likely to hire? I know it's local authorities, but I'm wondering if others would hire as well.
Yes, some planning students apply for jobs at consulting firms, and consulting firms often have jobs available, and so that's another option. I was fortunate that Montgomery County Planning Commission had a very active local planning program, which is what interested me the most at that time, and also had representatives from the county on the Regional Planning Commission board. So after a while, I started going to those meetings sometimes representing the county as an alternate to the main board members. And that was a wonderful experience to be involved at that level, to see how transportation funding decisions were made.
I would also think, and this opens my mind up to a lot of this, that if you look at an urban planning career, of course, as Justin mentioned, you did as well, the, local authorities, consultants, but I would think you could potentially, with the right schooling background, get a job with a utility company or potentially, with an environmental agency. Would that make sense?
Well, definitely with the environmental agency and sometimes with the utility company. And the other thing is you could also work for a developer and get the experience of how to develop a project and how to get it to implementation. That is sometimes where planners go, starting at the municipal or county level, and who want to get more into the development side, and they would try to apply for a job with a developer.
So are you suggesting, let's say the big construction company, that kind of level of development, just to be part of it, to get sort of a over the bleacher view of how things are put together and planned?
Yeah, that would be a potential role. I think, though, you can, for the average planner, you could start at the municipal or county level and get the experience that would result in working for a consultant or a development company. There's different paths to a career, and it depends on what your interests are.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. When I first met you, we first started talking about this and careers, connected with urban planning. My first thought is working with a town, city, county on that level. But there's so many other areas where planning and urban planning all come into play. Let's go back to what we talked about a moment ago with that mall. Many malls have many stores that are vacant. I went last week to the mall just to pick up something. It's been a while. It's nice to be in a store. And sadly, so many stores are either closed or they're in the mall, but they're not even operating. I don't know if it's staffing issues or whatever it might be. And then there's so many strip shopping centers with so many vacant stores at this point, at least, in this area. I don't know if it's like it where you are in the greater Pittsburgh area. What's the answer there with all these vacancies? Should it be turned into housing? Does that make sense?
Well, there have been proposals to take a vacant office space and provide housing for low and moderate income people. Even in New York, where the definition of low and moderate can sometimes be high income in other parts of the country. But the issue is one that can generate lots of controversy, because people who are in the existing communities may say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to have low and moderate income housing in the shopping mall. At the same time, I'm still trying to use it for retail shopping purposes. So that's a balancing act, and it requires careful planning and working with local officials if it's going to be implemented.
The more I, at least in this area, see them turning these buildings into housing, it's not affordable housing. I guess that's a relative term, but right. You're talking about apartments that are going for, and again, I'm on Long Island and not even close to the city. I'm talking about apartments minimum of $3,000, minimum, taking it up to like $4,000. That's by and large what's happening with these apartments that are being developed. I don't see that as affordable housing. Any thoughts on what we can do?
Well, there was an article in the Times today about building code requirements in New York City, where you have to build high-rises with windows that can be opened. And the other article was about parking minimums. You have to have a certain number of parking spaces per unit. And those things add costs to a project and make it less affordable because the developer has to recoup the money they're spending for these outdated requirements to build what is required. And if we had a more flexible approach on parking spaces and the idea of having windows that are permanently closed on a high-rise building in an urban setting like New York, those things can hold the costs down rather than increasing the costs.
It's funny you say that because I'm in an office building. It's only 2 stories. This is where, our studios are, offices. I rented in here. The windows don't open. Big, big, beautiful windows. Great, fantastic. I would do anything to be able to open a window, get some fresh air, maybe some, a nice breeze going through on a nice day. Is that pretty much a factor of keeping the cost down?
It could be. A 2-story building's a lot different from a 40-story high-rise.
Sure.
And so it's also a question of scale, and maybe you don't need huge windows, but you could have some windows that open.
Yeah.
That's an architectural issue and a building code issue.
Okay. All right. I never thought of it that way, that there could be a building code requirement. I don't know what that might be. Personally, I thought that maybe it was a safety thing. I don't know. That was my first thought.
Yeah. Also, it goes back to the days of the original zoning ordinances in the early 1900s with light and air as a goal. That instead of having tenement housing that was negative for people to live in, they started adding these requirements to make the spaces a little more livable with light and air.
I never thought about that. And maybe there's also an insulation situation with that, because I know when I did a renovation on a home, 2 homes back, this is probably in like 2010, I wanted a lot of windows, as many windows as possible in a back room. That I added, just sort of a utility room, part of an office there, just a extra living space. And I worked with the architect on the R value of the insulation in the walls versus the amount of windows, because you're giving up heat once you put in a window.
Right.
What can you tell us about all electric buildings? I know that's coming down the pike, and I'm talking, that's for New York State, but it's my understanding there's a law that bans natural gas, other types of fuels like that in new buildings. It's all electric cooking and heating required in those buildings, I believe, beginning next year. Any insight on that?
Well, it might relate to the fire safety code to try to block some of these buildings that have cooking units and other things that can potentially cause fires, and also carbon monoxide poisoning and other things. So the goal is worthwhile, but it may add costs to the projects.
Yeah, I remember hearing that just because of saving fuel and the environment, that there's no gas. They don't put, you build a new, even home, there's no gas. It's all electric.
Right.
I'm far from the expert, but I never realized that, electric would be better than gas for at least cooking and heating and all of that.
Yeah, that's a really worthwhile goal to put it all on electric, but that's a cost issue. And to convert an existing building to an all-electric building may be even higher cost issue.
Sure. Just a random question that popped in my head. If you're not in an earthquake-prone area, are there thoughts when buildings are being put up?
I think local building codes and state codes for earthquakes and floods and things like that are what guide the development process, and you have to follow the codes. And so that given the experience in the South this couple of months ago with the flooding and other issues, that's critical. It used to just be worrying about sand coming into buildings along the coast from storms, but now it's floodwater coming in inland areas because the rivers are affected as well as the coast.
Sure. And even in the situation with the hurricane in North Carolina,
right,
it appears that they weren't so prepared because there wasn't any water nearby going on in construction. Are they, when it comes to those codes in municipalities, are they fairly regularly being updated, or a lot of the codes kind of go back decades?
No, the building profession and the Transportation Research Board and other organizations encourage and sometimes require regular updates of these things.
It's the more we talk, Richard, the more, not that I didn't have respect for people that do what you do, by far, so much at stake here, but the more respect I have because there's so much involved within the planning, right down to, you're putting up a building or you're renovating, changing a shopping center into an apartment building, parking. How many spaces? I got to believe deep research that goes into that to determine how many spaces would be most effective, right?
Yeah, most municipal ordinances require 2 spaces per unit. And I didn't read the article yet, but the article in the Times today talks about some places where they require 3 spaces. And the issue is that extra space really needed? Because it takes away from the buildable area, and it also adds cost.
Sure.
And that's the consideration.
Yeah. Just about out of time. Always fantastic talking with you. I learn a lot. I know others learn a lot, but also you're an inspiration for many going in this direction in terms of a career. And this type of career isn't going away anytime soon at all. That's why you're our Man of the Year. Richard, thank you so much for being with us once again.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these 2 things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.